give me the big picture. It's easy to poke fun at Jim Phillips, so I do it hours at a time. But I also understand that there may be some other issues that I ignore in the midst of making fun of Jim Phillips in his sheepish efforts at the dais. Anything that you found out that intrigued you or was news to you, or can you give us a sense of what the feel of those meetings were like with the other schools and the reporters that were there to cover them?
Yeah, honestly, I'd probably want to focus on the reporters because, I don't have as good a relationship with some of these other ADs as they do. And I will say this, though, talking to these other, if you look at the way, and I'll write about this for our site, but if you look at the last couple of years of these meetings, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, back to 10 years ago when we were going through all this with the FSU and the ACC, the feeling has pretty much always been, until the last year or so, that, FSU's being whining, FSU's being a pain in the butt, FSU's complaining, they're the squeaky wheel, we get it, but they're kind of the outlier. Last year, you started to hear other media members, after they talked to their sources, saying, yeah, this doesn't really seem great for the conference.
Mm-hmm.
Now you're Clemson and North Carolina and other schools talking. Now when you talk to these other reporters who cover these other schools that are not Florida State or Clemson, including some of the national reporters, like, they all feel like the ACC's, it's more likely than not that it's going to either cease to exist or just crumble into something that's a fraction of what it is now. And that's the prevailing feeling from people in the media. Again, people who don't necessarily cover FSU or Clemson. So to me, that's kind of newsworthy or noteworthy that everybody needs to see the writing on the wall.
Little late, guys, especially for those that were ACC Twitter warriors and try to tell the world how selfish Florida State was acting and how, pompous, et cetera, the fan base was for believing that they were worth more than, say, a Wake Forest. It drives me nuts to see so many of these writers now, not all, but many of them come around to the way of thinking that Florida State led the charge with, which is, don't you want to compete for titles? Don't you want to matter in the only sport that brings home real revenue, real significant revenue? Don't you care that you're getting the shaft and that it's only going to get worse with the way things are trending? Those folks all acted like FSU, its fans, its administration, anybody that defended Florida State's efforts to stick up for themselves. They all acted like Florida State was being a spoiled child and was in some ways wrong to do so. Now they see the writings on the wall. Yeah, good luck, guys. Go to hell.
And I think what was another thing that was interesting from Michael Alford comments yesterday, and I know sometimes fans, when they read comments from a president or an AD that are not as forceful as they'd like to see, some people, get upset or they wonder, they want to see more vigor, more, fire and brimstone from these officials. I thought if you read between the lines or just read some of the subtle comments from Michael Alford,
yeah,
they were pretty strong. Like, one thing he talked about was, he was asked about Clemson filing lawsuit and whether or not he was surprised by that. And he said, no, I wasn't surprised by that. And, Clemson is a school that desires to achieve success. They desire to be an elite college football program. In other words, unlike the rest of you.
Yeah.
He didn't say that, but that's kind of implied. And then, the other one was just talking about the just the frustration about the way the league has handled things. He's not going to say that, the deal that there's no chance they could stay in the ACC. But if you read between the lines, it's clear this is not going to be a successful venture, and Florida State needs to get out.
Well, and there's no sense, I would say to the people who want him to continue to saber rattle, he already did it. Right. He made the announcement with authority. And then he has doubled down and tripled down and quadrupled down on it. There's no reason to keep doing it. Everybody understands Florida State's position. They're firmly entrenched in that position. That is not going to change unless Jim Phillips were to announce something crazy like, hey, everybody, I've decided last second, Florida State gets 70% of all the revenue the conference makes.
Exactly.
That's not going to happen.
Yeah, and also, you had, again, a year ago, you had Florida State doing their saber rattling, and Clemson was doing a lot of it behind closed doors. And now, in the last year now, Clemson obviously came out, they did their lawsuit, and now you see North Carolina now, this is the second time this week that their board of trustees have come out with comments with real concerns about the ACC and the ACC payouts, and it feels like, the next step is going to be for North Carolina to do the same. And it's like, man, how do you survive as a conference if you lose those three schools? It could survive as a conference, but it won't be anything like, it won't be considered. It'll be considered along the lines of, the group of five conferences.
Oh, 100%. And as we've heard from Tom Quitz when he's come on, and really anybody else covering this case with a law background, they've all said the more people that enter the fray, the better it is for Florida State. I mean, in essence, at that point, you're fighting a war on all borders here. You're like, you look to your left, you look straight ahead, you look to your right, man, there's somebody there. Everybody's there. They're at the door. They're at the gates. At some point, the ACC just decides on a number, mediates all of this, and says, I'm out, right?
You would have to assume so. And again, that ESPN deal looming next year is why it's kind of so interesting. And I would love to know, the ESPN deal this is one of the things that FSU alleged in their lawsuit was the ACC was and the ESPN were supposed to have that look in originally a year or two earlier, or actually I think 2 or 3 years earlier, but ESPN pushed it back. They wanted to push it back till 2025. And you wonder if ESPN knew what was coming and if they wanted to see how it all played out before they committed to what they're going to do in the future. And if that's the case, then again, it kind of makes you wonder how tied in the ACC, ESPN is with the ACC, and how invested they are. Because that's one of the things that has been a big conversation this week. Behind, on top of everything else, is the issue with Florida State getting snubbed out of college football playoff, the way the ACC got treated in terms of the run up to the NCAA tournament, and so many schools getting left out of the NCAA tournament, and the question from a lot of the coaches to ESPN when ESPN was here this week was, what's your plan to help promote us? We're partners. We're supposed to be your partners. What are you doing to promote us? And from what we can gather, ESPN doesn't really have any answers for that, because the bottom line is that's not their interest. Their interest is promoting the SEC, and it makes you wonder if they pushed that look in back a few years because they saw what was going to be happening in the meantime.
Yeah, it sounds like these meetings just further confirmed what we already knew, and then in some cases shined a light even brighter on it, that if you're in the ACC and you're seeking to compete at the highest levels and go toe-to-toe with your biggest rivals in this regional footprint, you're in the wrong place, because you're an asset to ESPN, but you are a second or third tier asset.
Maybe Suge Knight should have showed up. Or I guess Greg Sankey should have showed up, or the guy with the Big Ten, and said, if you want to be in a conference,
you don't want your ADs dancing in your videos, and
no, for sure, man. And then you have these other schools that have to go on as business as usual, because they understand the reality that these schools are going to be leaving and they're going to be stuck with this conference, and what does that look like? And it's a weird place, man. This conference is a weird place right now, but I think it's all I do get the sense in the next year or so, it's, for the most part, it's going to be resolved, and we'll know where FSU is going to be. Is
managing editor Ira Schafel at Amelia Island this time next year covering the ACC spring meetings?
I think we will not be here.